With no authorities to guide, he searched within for the systems of spiritual and material management and crafted an astonishing set of procedures and flows to guide every aspect of his several institutions, and to inform the monks' lives and relationships. At this point, Master changed the name of his headquarters from Shivashram to Kauai Adinam, which, for the sake of local islanders, he also called Kauai's Hindu Monastery. His travels diminished as he began to set up roots deep in the Kauai soil. Under his instructions, the senior monks began a thorough study of Shaiva Siddhanta and its relationship with and difference from Adi Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, Rishi Tirumalar's Tirumantiram, and Saint Tiruvalluvar's Tirukural. The seminal spiritual texts of Shaiva Siddhanta were translated, memorized, and commented upon in his inspired talks. He commissioned the carving of life-size granite murtis of Tirumular and Tiruvalluvar in South India and brought them to the monastery, giving visual form to their psychic and theological presence. Late in the 1970s, Master had two magnificent 6-foot-tall murtis, the portly Ganesha and the noble Murugan atop his peacock, carved by renowned master architect Nilamigam Sthapati in Mahabalipuram in February 1979. They arrived from India, and Master had them installed in Kadavul Hindu Temple on June 1st. On a remote American island, Shaivite Hinduism was being fully grounded in the West, every aspect of it, not a modern American version of Hinduism, thought by some to be a logical, even inevitable evolution, but the complete, unabridged Hinduism that has been followed for millennia. A 32,000-pound black stone Nandi was also brought to Kauai to sit outside Kadavul Temple in perpetual adoration of Lord Shiva, making TV's Channel 9 News, which opened the piece with the tongue-in-cheek headline, 16 Tons of Bull. The enormous sculpture, ordered in 1976, took 4 years for Nilamegam Sthapati to complete, arriving finally on August 16, 1980. He confided to the monks that Nandi, the Joyous One, ranked among the finest creations of his lifetime. The huge granite bull, 6 feet tall, 9 feet long, and 5 feet wide, was the largest carved in India in the 20th century and among the 5 largest ever carved. For the next decade, Kadavul Temple pulsated with a palpable Shakti that sustained the monastery and changed the lives of all who visited. With the basic elements of the temple in place, Master allowed no further construction until the fall of 1984. Then he marshaled a major construction effort reminiscent of the early 1970s, landscaping around the temple, putting in hundreds of feet of concrete paths, lining Kadavul's bare concrete block walls with lava rock inside and out, tiling walls, floors, and ceiling, and installing shelves for the 108 bronze Tandava Murtis depicting Shiva in 108 dance poses that he had specially cast in South India. March of 1985 marked the traditional 12-year point in the life of Hindu temples when refurbishing and repairs are permitted prior to a grand reconsecration ritual. You might call it a full restarting of the system in which the energy is actually removed from the temple during extensive homas and then placed back inside once physical improvements are complete. Master tried it out this one time. 2 priests, one from Madurai and another from Bangalore, performed elaborate rites that took the power of the temple deities into special kumbhas, which were then transferred to a temporary yagasala constructed under a nearby banyan tree. The effect of the 3-day ceremony was not subtle. It was as if the earth had slipped off its axis. The feeling was eerie, unsettled, downright spooky. The temple, emptied of its spiritual potency, felt like an abandoned warehouse, a feeling Master and the monks did not enjoy. The weather went wild with horizontal rains, thunder, lightning, and howling winds. The monastery was upset as never before. Master vowed to never do this again, even though it is traditionally required every 12 years. It took months until the Sanidhya was restored. Building a yoga order. Naming each year had long been Master's way of setting a direction for everyone. He called 1974 the year of the Guru and 1975 the year of the monastics, his way of informing one and all that all would be working on the Guru-Shishya relationship, training and more training. The monks did everything themselves, as was once done in India, where today much of a matha's care is given into the hands of overseers, cooks, groundskeepers, carpenters, and accountants. Not at Kauai Adinam. Virtually every task was done by the monks, who took great joy in the ideas of self-sufficiency and the diverse skill set that emerged. It was hard work. The monks were challenged and corrected, not always softly, and were expected to respond, expected to receive the correction in a non-defensive spirit and use it to change and improve their lives. Those who threw it back, who cried unfair, soon learned that such tactics did not work. Obey the Guru, that worked. Eschew self-defense and stop blaming the blamer, that worked. Change yourself and don't demand others to do the same, that worked too. Years later, Master would smile while explaining that the monks were all soft and gentle, harmonious and kindly, and that they had gotten that way in much the same manner a jeweler polishes gems. Rough gems are thrown into a turning vat and allowed to tumble for days against one another, each being an agent of abrasion for all the others, each losing its own sharp edges by constant collisions. In such a way, the monks living together, working together, struggling and learning together, meditating and worshipping together under the Guru's direction, each slowly became a polished gem, differently faceted, of different colors, but all gems. All due, they knew, to the Guru's grace. These years of working with the monks led Master to stress the artisan-apprentice system of training. Older monks, with their accumulated skills, were assigned to train the younger ones, and the younger to serve and learn under their elders. In time, this evolved into what Master called the Kulam system, the overall architecture of monastery management of duties and responsibilities. Kulam means family in the Tamil language, and, by extension, describes a group of monks in the same field of expertise and service. 5 kulams emerged, each called by one of Lord Ganesha's names, each an independent team responsible for an aspect of the monastery's daily routine: temple, kitchen, lambodara, members nurturing, teaching, ekadanta, administration, finance, pilayar, buildings, grounds, siddhidata, and publications, ganapati. The monks were sent to India and Sri Lanka for longer periods during this time to absorb, learn, immerse themselves in Shaivism and in the worship of god Shiva at his great temples. Master had them work on the scriptures, learn Shiva Puja from the Shivacharyas, experience the magic that is India and the culture which he regarded as the world's most sublime. With the monks well established in the faith, he made another major move. The conversion conundrum. I have paid my debt to my countrymen. Henceforth I live in service to Tamil Shaivites throughout the world. With these words, spoken to all assembled in the San Francisco Temple on January 5, 1977, his 50th Jayanti, Master Subramania formally and finally retired from public ministry in the West. He knew from expertise that commitment to a single spiritual path is essential to the deepest goals of life, and those who waffled or straddled or hedged would not get far. So he determined not to be guru to the curious and the uncommitted, choosing to dedicate the remainder of his lifetime in service to the Shaivite religion and the greater glory of God Shiva, the gods, and his Satguru Shiva Yoga Swami. No more public lectures, no more explaining for the umpteenth time what yoga means. Again, some of the monks, even some who had been close for decades, left the order, unable to follow where Master was leading. Though initially it was one of his rare disappointments, this winnowing process proved part of a larger plan. Those who stayed were wholeheartedly dedicated to fulfilling Master's mission. This created a harmony and one-pointedness that could not previously have been achieved or even imagined. The lesson was not lost on the monks. The strength of an organization depends on its members' level of commitment. In more general terms, quality is more important than quantity. For the last 2 decades, Master had taught the highest truths of Advaita, the self-God, to students with non-Hindu backgrounds. The real-world trials and tribulations through the years had convinced him that in order to have these lofty teachings bear fruit in his students, they must fully embrace the Hindu religion and culture, eschewing all others. He saw the power of one-minded commitment to a path and the infinite distractions that face anyone who has not the strength of such focus. The loftiest of human spiritual summits was only for the strong and the sure-footed. For years Master had seen the effects of divided loyalties, those who kept their Christian names and a few beliefs while adopting a Hindu lifestyle and nickname. It did not work. It divided the person, evoking a religious schizophrenia. One should decide who one is, fully and forever, as he had done. Never mind what family or community might think. Thus, in 1977, he intensified requirements for his Western devotees to sever all prior religious, philosophical loyalties, legalize their Hindu names, and formally enter Hinduism through the name-giving rite, upholding the same standard that he required of his monks. To exemplify the ideal he was asking of them, he dropped the name Master and adopted a traditional Hindu name for a spiritual preceptor, Gurudeva. This all went against the grain of many in the Hindu world, who cringed at the word conversion, but he explained that conversion is nothing new for Hinduism. The advent of Jainism and Buddhism in India in 600 BCE resulted in the conversion of millions of Hindus. Centuries later, revivals resulted in the reconversion of millions of Jains and Buddhists. In modern times, conversion to or from Hinduism remains a major issue, often resulting in extreme disharmony within families and towns. We have Hindus switching as a result of enticement or deception. We have Indians who converted wanting to return to Hinduism, and we have non-Hindus from lands outside India requesting formal entrance into the faith, including those who have married a Hindu. Gurudeva addressed each of these issues, ultimately formalizing his experience and suggestions for ethical conversion in the book How to Become a Hindu. Most conversions in religion, he observed, are forced or wrongly motivated. Catholics stealing from the Jewish flock, Muslims converting from among the Baptists, Mormons and Pentecostals harvesting souls, that awful phrase, aggressively from them all. Gurudeva thought religions should respect each other. If, say, a Jewish boy wanted to convert, he should be encouraged by his new spiritual advisors to seek the blessings of his rabbi, not run away from the synagogue in the dark of night. As with his approach to most topics, he started with a mystical insight. In ancient times, people tended to reincarnate right within the same village and religion time and again. Now, he said, with modern-day travel and worldwide communication, this tightly knit pattern of reincarnation is dispersed, and souls find new bodies in different countries, families, and religions, which in some cases are foreign to them. For such a person, the Eastern soul in a Western body, he proposed a thoughtful and peaceful method of self-conversion. He required his devotees wanting to convert from a previous faith to study that faith and explain convincingly, point by point, why they no longer held its beliefs. He sent them back to their churches, synagogues, even previous Hindu gurus, to attend services for a while and speak with their ministers. Every chance was given for them to change their mind or to have someone change it for them. If they passed this test, they were required to demonstrate their knowledge of Hinduism through a series of exams, legalize their new Hindu first and last name, then enter the faith formally through the name-giving rite, Namakarana Samskara, in an established temple. The name was important to Gurudeva, and he insisted his shishyas put their legal name on all documents, passport, driver's license, bank documents, everything, a requirement for church membership to this day. Seeing the tendency of many groups to keep the birth name and informally adopt a Shaivite Hindu name, and the dual identities provoked by toggling between the two, he insisted on a single, formal, legal Shaivite name, and would settle for nothing less. In early years, he had longtime members help newcomers make this transition, but eventually he required those interested in his teachings to do it all on their own strength and motivation. There were many among his devotees who had no previous religion, even though they grew up in the West. These seekers were allowed to adopt Hinduism as their first religion through the study of it and the life-giving ceremony, without the need to convert. Gurudeva strongly enjoined Hindus of the broader community to welcome sincere Western converts and adoptives into their midst and not shun or ignore them, as is often done. Those who undertook this serious conversion to Hinduism went through a great fire which transformed them forever, hardened their commitments, purified their loyalties, and made them some of the strongest Hindus in the world. This strictness was radically different from the stance of all other Hindu and quasi-Hindu groups, much of which required little or nothing by way of real change or commitment. Gurudeva would jest that they abhorred the C word, that today's seekers are deeply committed to remaining uncommitted. This would set his followers apart and make them leaders. Years later, Hindu philosopher and writer Ram Swarup, who met Gurudeva and his Shishyas and contributed articles to Hinduism Today, wrote of them in The Observer, New Delhi, 1998. They are not NRIs, they are mainly white Americans, converts, Hindus by choice, and some are sannyasins at that. Those of us Hindu by birth tend to take Hinduism for granted and neglect its deeper, spiritual categories, but it is different with those who embrace it after much reflection and self-searching. They are seekers and sadhakas. They are interested in the problems of God, of self, of inner life, of dharma and mukti. The year 1979 began with a whirlwind week of Guru Jayanti celebrations that included over 20 Namakarana Samskaras conducted in Kadavul Hindu temple. Devotees received this name-giving sacrament, marking their entrance into the Shaivite Hindu religion, had studied for several years within Malayan Academy. Many had completed arduous severance procedures from their former religions. It was a landmark event in American history. In the coming years, after hundreds of self-conversions and Namakrana Samskaras, Gurudeva became content with his fellowship, proud of its strict adherence to Dharma. Thereafter, he only reluctantly took others into the faith, and only if they knocked the door down with their urgent sincerity. He had crafted a Hindu community in the West, built it from scratch, and spent the rest of his life from within the confines of Hinduism, with little connection to the merely curious, giving his energies to those who had made a full commitment to the Hindu Dharma. The vision of the future was clear in Gurudeva's mind. In it, Shaivite Hinduism held a place of honor alongside the other faiths. Hindu families in the West were strong and integrated, supportive of one another, and firm in their spiritual commitments. Working toward the future, he assembled all of the elements, one by one, giving large tasks to his monks. Under his direction, they developed family codes of conduct and discipline, ministerial guidelines, children's study courses, Hindu hymnals, and rites of passage to guide Hindus from conception to death. He crafted certificates to qualify lay chaplains and school teachers, developed a Shaivite homeschooling program, and wrote lessons to guide teens through their difficult years. The Hindu Businessmen's Association was created to bring stability to Hindu entrepreneurs, and the Hindu Women's Liberation Council to give a forum to women. His vision encompassed the East as well, for he saw a lack of training there too, especially for children. In Alavedi, Sri Lanka, his Subramania ashram initiated a highly successful series of classes in spoken English for children, along with classes in music, dance, art, Tirumantaram, and Devaram hymns. He propounded the need for national and even international councils of Hindu organizations to aid in forwarding and sharing the knowledge of experience and experiment among the thousands of Hindu congregations that he saw would one day dot the landscape of the United States, Canada, Britain, South America, Europe, and Asia. While no such communities existed at the time, his vision would manifest in a mere 30 years. To tie far-flung groups together, Gurudeva worked hard to re-establish the monastic printing facilities, bringing equipment from Nevada to Kauai and founding a newspaper, the New Shaivite World, which gave news of Shaivism around the world. In doing this work, Gurudeva had precious little help. Those who knew the tradition were on the other side of a non-interneted world and not much able to guide. This drove him within to seek the guidance of Yoga Swami, and in dozens of crucial moments, that guidance flooded forth. forth. Gurudeva would frequently tell the monks that Yogaswami visited in a vision or meditation, gave bold instructions to do this, to avoid that, to initiate a project or let another go. Yogaswami was his connection to the true Shaiva path, and Gurudeva assiduously followed every hint, however subtle, that came from his guru. One day Gurudeva reported, Yogaswami gave a 3-word order with no explanation: don't be equivocal. Gurudeva asked the monks, what does equivocal mean? Hearing that it means to be uncertain and full of ambiguity, he immediately undertook a style of expression that was direct, firm, and clear, without possibility for misinterpretation or unclarity. His closeness to the Guru, who had left his body some 15 years earlier, was a lesson to the monks and an inspiration. 2 Tamil treasures. By the late 70s, Gurudeva, the white-haired American Hindu mystic, had effectively established an adinam, a traditional Tamil Shaiva monastery temple complex, the first ever in the West. He was officially the pontiff, the Mahasannidhanam of Kauai Adinam, and he took it as his charge to re-articulate Shaiva Siddhanta for a new era, using modern English. In doing so, he rejected Puranic stories and the epics, which he, perhaps alone among Hindu leaders, boldly decried as philosophically inconsistent and mistakenly elevated to the status of scripture. He must have felt the authority of this spiritual seat, for he spoke with imposing certitude, and each of his declarations and edicts rang true to all who were with him. The works he produced in this period were full of fire and force, pure expositions, mystically authentic expressions of his guru's religion. In a flattering twist, his writing found avid friends among the Tamil Shaiva elite and were translated into Tamil, propounded as the clearest articulation of Shaiva Siddhanta in modern times in any language. Dr. B. Natarajan, S. Ramasheshan, S. Shanmugasundaram, and others were among the translators. Gurudeva promoted the yogic perspective of monistic theism, the religious theology also known as panentheism that embraces both monism and theism, 2 perspectives sometimes considered contradictory or mutually exclusive. He brought uncommon clarity to the pivotal Hindu concepts of karma and reincarnation, affirming that all souls are intrinsically good, that all karmas can be resolved, that realization, as he had experienced it, can be attained, and that liberation from the cycles of birth and death is indeed possible. He propounded Shaiva Siddhanta's 4-stage path to God, consisting of charya, service, kriya, worship, yoga, meditation, and jnana, wisdom. These stages, he said, are successive and cumulative, each one preparing for the next. He extolled temples and elucidated proper ways of worship. He also laid out in detail the disciplines of monastic and family life, including specific instructions about the control of sexual force. So that people could catch the overview of the world's oldest religion, he summarized Hinduism in 9 beliefs and Shaivism in 12. He put forward the Vedas and Agamas as Hinduism's primary and revealed scriptures, but also acknowledged secondary scriptures like the Tirumantaram by Tirumular and the Tirukural by Tiruvalavar, both circa 200 BCE. In India during Tiruvalavar's time, there was neither paper nor pens, so writing was accomplished with a stylus, the characters being scraped or scratched into a specially prepared leaf called an olai leaf. Many ancient scriptures and literature were produced in this manner. It is amazing that some of the original writings so made still exist today. Certainly no modern-day paper would have withstood the centuries so well. Again and again he brought forward the traditional path of Shaiva Samayam and taught his monks and later the lay families the nuances of that path, its vocabulary and theology. Clearly he wanted Yogaswami's path to be deeply embedded in his shishyas. Introducing the 2 life-size statues which he had installed on the monastery grounds, Gurudeva described his view of these 2 cardinal scriptures in glowing terms. The statue of Saint Tirumular shows him sitting in the lotus posture, deep in meditation, while Saint Tiruvalavar is seated with a small writing table on his lap, composing his sacred verses with stylus in hand. His Tirukural Kural speaks on virtuous living. It gives us the keys to a happy and harmonious life in the world, but it doesn't give any insights into the nature of God, whereas the Tirumantaram delves into the nature of God, man, and the universe in its depths. Taken together, they speak to all Hindus and offer guidance for every aspect of religious life. The first addressing itself to the achievement of virtue, wealth, and love, while the second concerns itself with attainment of moksha or liberation. The Tirumantaram is a mystical book and a difficult book. The original text is written in metered verse, composed in the ancient Tamil language. Saint Tirumular is the first one to codify Shaiva Siddhanta, the final conclusions, and the first one to use the term Shaiva Siddhanta. It is a document upon which the entire religion could stand, if it had to. It is one of the oldest scriptures known to man. I was very happy to find that all my own postulations gathered from realization are confirmed in this great work. That is why this book is so meaningful to me, as a verification of personal experience and a full statement of the philosophical fortress erected and protected by our Guru Parampara. His 1978 talk, Tirumantaram, Fountainhead of Shaiva Siddhanta, exerted here is a glimpse into his emphasis on this sacred text. One of the oldest of the preserved theologies of Shaivism available to us today is that of Saint Tirumular. Of course, his was not the first theology, just one of the oldest to be preserved. He did not start anything new. His work, the Tirumantaram, is only a few hundred years older than the New Testament. He codified Shaivism as he knew it. He recorded its tenets in concise and precise verse form, drawing upon his own realizations of the truths it contained. His work is not an intellectual construction, and it is not strictly a devotional canon either. It is based in yoga. It exalts and explains yoga as the kingly science, leading man to knowledge of himself. It contains theological doctrine and devotional hymns. It is the full expression of man's search, encompassing the soul, the intellect, and the emotions. Saint Tirumular was a Himalayan rishi, a Siddha, sent on mission to South India to spread the purest teachings of Shaivism to the people there. Hinduism is a missionary religion. Everyone within it, myself included, is on a mission or is purifying himself through sadhana, enough so that he can be given a mission for the religion from some great soul, or a god perhaps. This is the pattern within Shaivism, and Saint Tirumular's mission was to summarize and thereby renew and reaffirm at one point in time the final conclusions of the Sanatana Dharma, the purest Shaiva path, Shaiva Siddhanta. Today we hear the term Siddhanta, and various meanings of the word may come to mind. For some, perhaps, their immediate thought would be Mekanda Devar and his interpretation of Shaiva Siddhanta. For others, some concept of a philosophy halfway between Advaita Vedanta and Dvaita, a vague area of unclarity, and for others, various literal translations of the words such as true end, final end, or true conclusion. The term Siddhanta appears for the first time in the Tirumantaram. The word anta carries the connotation of goal, conclusion, as does the English word end. Tirumular's specific use of the word was the teachings and the true conclusions of the Shaiva Agamas, and these he felt were identical with Vedanta or the conclusions of the Upanishads. In fact, he makes it very clear that pure Shaiva Siddhanta must be based on Vedanta. Siddhanta is specific, giving the sadhanas and practical disciplines which bring one to the final truth. Vedanta is general, simply declaring in broad terms the final truth that is the goal of all paths. There are those who would intellectually divide Siddhanta from Vedanta, thus cutting off the goal from the means to that goal. But our Guru Parampara holds them to be not different. How can we consider the mountain path less important than the summit to which it leads us? Both are one. Siddhanta and Vedanta are one also, and both are contained in Shaiva Siddhanta. That is the conclusion of Scripture, and the conclusion of my own experiences as well. The Suddha Siddhanta of Shaiva Siddhanta is Vedanta. Vedanta was never meant to stand alone, apart from worship, apart from religious tradition. It has only been taken in that way since Swami Vivekananda brought it to the West. The Western man and Western-educated Eastern man have tried in modern Vedanta to secularize traditional Sanatana Dharma, to take the philosophical conclusions of the Hindu religion and set them apart from the religion itself, apart from charya and kriya, service and devotion. Vedantists who are members of other religions have unintentionally sought to adopt only the highest philosophy of Hinduism, to the exclusion of the rich customs, observances, and temple worship. They have not fully realized that these must precede yoga for yoga to be fully successful. Orthodox Hindus understand these things in a larger perspective. These same problems of misinterpretation must have existed even in St. Tirumular's time, for he writes that the pure and illustrious Siddhanta is Vedanta, verse 1422. The Bhakta of the eulogized Suddha Shaivam is the Eternal One. He is the blemishless Jnani and ruler of radiant Jnana. He is the truly liberated in whom wisdom has dawned and who is stable in the middle position of the Vedanta Siddhanta teachings, verse 1428. It may be that St. Tirumular pioneered the reconciliation of Vedanta and Siddhanta, but what is the Vedanta that Tirumular was referring to? Shankara, with his exposition of Vedanta, was not to come for many centuries. Thus, concepts such as Nirguna and Saguna Brahman being two separate realities rather than one transcendent, immanent God, the absolute unreality of the world, and the so-called differences between the jnana path and the previous stages had not yet been tied into Vedanta. The Vedanta that Tirumular knew was the direct teachings of the Upanishads. If there is one thing the Upanishads are categorical in declaring, it is Advaita, Tattvam Asi, thou art that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. And when Saint Tirumular says that Siddhanta is based on Vedanta, he is using Vedanta to refer to his Advaita, which according to him must be the basis of Siddhanta. This is perhaps one of the most important essentials of Tirumular's Siddhanta to be brought forward into the Siddhanta of today, for it did in fact stray from the Rishi's postulations. That is why we occasionally use the term Advaita Shaiva Siddhanta. It conveys our belief in the Siddhanta, which has as its ultimate objective the Vedanta. It sets us apart from the Dvaita Shaiva Siddhanta school of interpretation, begun by Mekanda Devar, which sees God and the soul as eternally separate, never completely unified. It is not unusual to find two schools, similar in most ways, yet differing on matters of theology. In fact, this has been true throughout history. It has its source in the approach to God. On the one hand, you have the rishi, the yogi, the sage, or siddha, who is immersed in his sadhana, deep into yoga, which brings forth direct experience. His conclusions will always tend towards Advaita, toward a fully non-dual perception. It isn't even a belief, it is the philosophical aftermath of experience. Most Satgurus and those who follow the monastic path will hold firmly to the precepts of Advaita Shaiva Siddhanta. On the other hand, there are the philosophers, the scholars, the pandits, relying not on experience and ignoring yoga. They must surmise, postulate, arrange, and rearrange concepts through an intricate intellectual process in an effort to reason out what God must be like. These are not infrequently the grihastas, and their reasoning leads them to one or another form of Dvaita Shaiva Siddhanta. These are both valid schools, they are both traditional schools, and comparisons are odious, but they are very different one from the other, and it is good that we understand those differences. We must understand the difference between the self-God, Parashiva, and the soul. Many people think that the self is something that you get, you pursue it, and after a while you get it, like you get something in the world, but the self is not separated from you by even the tiniest amount. You cannot go someplace and get it and bring it back. The formless, transcendent self is never separate from you. It is closer than your heartbeat. God Shiva is called the primal soul because he is the perfect form, the original soul who then created individual souls. The individual soul has a beginning and it has an end, merging with God. It has form as well. All form has a beginning and an end. The absolute self, Parashiva, is formless, timeless, endless, and beginningless. All things are in the self, and the self is in all things. Many people think of the self as an object to be sought. You start here and you go there. and you get the self, you pursue it today, and if you don't get it today, you try again tomorrow. It's different than that. It comes from within you more as a becoming of your whole being than something that you pursue and get, and yet you seem to pursue it and seem to get it. It is very difficult to explain. The individual soul is different. The soul has a form. The soul is a form, a very refined and subtle form to be sure, but still a form, and form obeys the laws of form. The soul has a beginning in Lord Shiva and an end in union with him. The purpose of life is to know God, your very self. This is the end of all religions, of all religious effort. That is why we say that religion is this process of lifting ourselves up, attuning our minds to the laws of life so that we become stronger and more mature beings. We become higher beings living in the higher chakras, and we come closer and closer to God. God doesn't come closer to us. How will God come any closer? He is closer to you right now than your own thoughts. He is nearer than breathing, closer than hands and feet. I shall explain the soul in yet another way, for I see a questioning look in some of your faces. Man has 5 bodies, each more subtle than the last. Visualize the soul of a man as a light bulb, and his various bodies or sheaths as colored fabrics covering the pure white light. The physical body is the outermost body. Next comes the pranic body. Then the physical body's subtle duplicate, the astral body. Then there is the mental or intellectual body, in which one can travel instantaneously anywhere. Then comes the body of the soul, which I term the actinotic body. This is the body that evolves from birth to birth, that reincarnates into new outer sheaths, and does not die when the physical body returns its elements to the earth. This body eventually evolves as the actinic body, the body of light, the golden body of the soul. This soul body, in its final evolution, is the most perfect form, the prototype of human form. Once physical births have ceased, this soul body still continues to evolve in subtle realms of existence. This effulgent actinic body of the illumined soul, even after nirvikalpa samadhi, God realization, continues to evolve in the inner worlds until the final merger with Shiva. I like to say God, God, God. There is one God only, but man's comprehension of that is helped by consciously exploring the 3 aspects of the one divine being, the absolute pure consciousness, or the self flowing through all form, and the creator of all that is. Lord Shiva is the absolute self, Parashiva, the timeless, formless, spaceless reality beyond the mind, beyond all form, beyond our subtlest understanding. Parashiva can only be experienced to be known, and then it cannot be explained. Lord Shiva is pure consciousness, the substratum, or primal substance of all that exists. He is the energy within all existence. He is Satchitananda, or truth, consciousness and bliss, the self that flows through all form. Lord Shiva is the primal soul, Maheshvara, the original and most perfect being. He is the source and the creator, having never been created. He is the Lord of all beings. He created all souls out of himself, and he is ever creating, preserving, and destroying forms in an endless divine dance. When I was 9 years old, I was taught that Lord Shiva is God, God the creator, God the preserver, and God the destroyer. To this day I know and believe that Shiva is all of these, Brahma, Vishnu, and Rudra. These are the final conclusions of Shaivism, the Sanatana Dharma. You must all study the great scriptures of our religion. These divine utterances of the Siddhas will enliven your own inner knowing. The Tirumantaram is similar to the Tirukural in many ways. You can teach them both to the children and apply their wisdom to everyday life. You can use them for guidance in times of trouble and confusion, and they will unerringly guide you along the right path. You can read them as hymns after sacred puja in your home shrine or in the temple precincts. Each verse can be used as a prayer, as a meditation, as a holy reminder of the great path that lies ahead. It is a difficult work, but don't be discouraged by that. Just understand that it could easily take a lifetime, several lifetimes, to understand all that is contained in this scripture, that it is for those deep into their personal sadhana. It was given by the saint to those who fully knew of the Vedas and the Agamas, and to understand it, you too will have to become more familiar with these other scriptures, slowly obtaining a greater background. It is interesting to reflect on the parallels, how Saint Tirumular was sent by his Himalayan guru to the south to spread Shaiva Siddhanta to the generation of his day, and how Gurudeva sent back to the west by Yoga Swami to build a bridge between the east and the west did much the same work for today's Shaivite seekers around the globe. Both men took Shaivism's cultural and spiritual treasures from one culture and one language to another, drawing upon their deepest realizations to unravel, summarize, and explain, bringing Shaivism forward in a new era. Gurudeva's love of Tirumular and his deeply mystical verses derived in part from the saint's uncompromising philosophy of oneness and in part from the bold Shaivism expressed. In every talk for years he would quote Tirumular and, with a wry smile, note how happy he was to find a scripture that was in consonance, perfect agreement with his own realizations. Here are some verses from the Tirumantaram. In the distressed world existing in the midst of the ocean, seeking the lustrous inner light residing in the body, one can experience in the waves of the expanding sea the inner Lord placed in the body. 30:28. Being the inner light of the three great lights, sun, moon, and fire, the Lord of the celestials stands as their intelligible bodies, leaving the great lights in the limited space. He follows in compassion as the minutest of all. 30:29. He is the consciousness, he is the life, he is the embracer, and he is the act of sulking. He is the imponderable, yet one can think of him. He is akin to the pollen of a flower. 28:57. The Lord with flowering matted locks, bedecked with conry flowers, is mingled everywhere as the subtle being. The 8 cardinal directions, the worlds above and below, are centering round him in this manner. 30:42. One day in 1977, he called a few senior Swamis to his office and asked them to read to him from another South Indian scripture, the Tirukural. He knew Yoga Swami had given great import to this text by the weaver saint of Mylapore. It was a Tamil masterpiece full of insights into the human condition and lifestyle principles learned by school children even today, but its content was not much known in English. The Swamis showed him a new translation of the classic into British English. It sounded quaint and artificial to his ears. He took the book, read several verses aloud, and paused on one to comment. "It's nice, but what does it mean exactly?" The meaning was discussed. Tamil dictionaries were consulted, and after half an hour, an attractive rewording of the rather turgid prose translated was achieved. Gurudeva was so delighted to have the meaning succinctly given that he gave 2 Swamis the mission of translating the entire Tirukural from the original Tamil into modern American usage, striving for perfect clarity of expression. They began that same day, as was Gurudeva's style. Though a relatively small work, just 1,080 couplets, the monks did not translate the final 250-verse section, which is a mildly sensuous love poem that seems to have been added later by another author. The ancient text was technically and linguistically complex, and it was 22 years later, with long interludes, that the full work was completed and published. In 1999, Weaver's Wisdom was finally published, with its straightforward American English. Gurudeva's summary at the end was, "We are actually living all the things Tiruvallar wrote about. His ideals have become our way of life." He called for a comparison of the verses with previous translators, and placing them side by side, smiled as if to say, "We did it." For example, verse 15 speaks of the importance of rain. In 1886, Reverend G.U. Pope rendered it, "'Tis rain works all, it ruin spreads, then timely aid supplies, as in the happy days before it bids the ruined rise." Gurudeva Swamis, adhering to the terse and direct Tamil, wrote, "It is rain that ruins, and it is rain again that raises up those it has ruined." Verse 252 on meat eating provides another example. In 1962, K.M. Balasubramaniam translated it as, "The blessings of wealth are not for those who fail to guard. The blessings of compassion for the flesh-eaters are barred." The Swamis translated it as, "Riches cannot be found in the hands of the thriftless, nor can compassion be found in the hearts of those who eat meat." Shaivism finds a modern voice. In 1978, after a hiatus of several years when his time was consumed with establishing the Kauai headquarters, and now free from outside influences that had demanded so much of his time and netted so little in return, Gurudeva took again to prolific publishing. It started with a simple series of pamphlets which he called prasada, or grace-filled gifts. Then came the booklets called Inspired Talks, published in the same style as the publications done in Virginia City. Though the monks printed these 16 to 24-page booklets from his Upadeshas, which was his lifelong manner of conveying his teachings, he wanted them to be elegant and so asked that they be professionally typeset in Honolulu. It worked until the invoice for phototypesetting came. Astonished by the $700 bill, Gurudeva refused to pay another nickel for type. Instead, he asked the publications team to explore ways they could produce their own phototypesetting in-house. The timing was perfect, for the first such device had just been released, and Gurudeva flew to Oahu with the monks to secure the purchase of a Quadratech 1200 photo typesetting machine. This tool transformed the way the monks were to publish in the years ahead, putting into their own hands the ability to set type in any font, any style, and for a reasonable cost. The effect was galvanizing. Type began to flow in streams that swelled to rivers. The immediacy of it inspired Gurudeva. Each time he saw a talk he gave one day typeset the next. He went right back to work to produce another and another. This cycle was different than before, in that the teachings were purely Shaivite. From his return to Lanka in 1969, 1970, and 1972, he had meditated on Shaiva Siddhanta, talked about Shaiva Siddhanta, lived Shaiva Siddhanta. Now that which had been within him began pouring out in 100 ways. Titles included free will and the deities in Hinduism, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, protect, preserve, and promote the Shaiva Dharma, the two perfections of our soul, the meditator, and more. Among the most popular and controversial was Hinduism, the greatest religion in the world. From the title, some feared it was a bigoted diatribe by a zealous believer claiming the superiority of his faith, but inside was a balanced summary of Sanatana Dharma, including a poignant statement on Hinduism's innate and unique tolerance for other faiths, listed among many facets of its greatness. Here is an excerpt. Hinduism has been called the cradle of spirituality and the mother of all religions, partially because it has influenced virtually every major religion, and partly because it can absorb all other religions, honor and embrace their scriptures, their saints, their philosophy. This is possible because Hinduism looks compassionately on all genuine spiritual effort and knows unmistakably that all souls are evolving toward union with the divine, and all are destined, without exception, to achieve spiritual enlightenment and liberation in this or a future life. Naturally, the Hindu feels that his faith is the broadest, the most practical and effective instrument of spiritual unfoldment, but he includes in his Hindu mind all the religions of the world as expressions of the one eternal path and understands each proportionately in accordance with its doctrines and dogma. He knows that certain beliefs and inner attitudes are more conducive to spiritual growth than others, and that all religions are therefore not the same. They differ in important ways, yet there is no sense whatsoever in Hinduism of an only path. A devout Hindu is supportive of all efforts that lead to a pure and virtuous life, and would consider it unthinkable to dissuade a sincere devotee from his chosen faith. This is the Hindu mind, and this is what we teach, what we practice, and what we offer aspirants on the path. Gurudeva developed a catechism for Shaivite Hindus and a creed for Shaivite Hindus, condensed summaries of the faith that he considered amongst his most important works. The catechism consists of questions and concise answers about life according to Shaivism, and the creed consists of 12 beliefs summarizing the philosophy. Every word was carefully chosen, discussed with the senior Swamis of the order, explored and crafted so as to carry the force and spirit of Shaivism into the minds of future generations. The work was ready a few days before Mahashivaratri, March 7, 1978. He then distilled the creed into an affirmation of faith, which was the shortest summation possible of the Shaiva Siddhanta beliefs, to be repeated each day by his followers. It simply says, God Shiva is immanent love and transcendent reality. The several stages of monastic life were documented and formalized for the future during this time, an ongoing effort of the senior Swamis of this theological seminary, working closely with Gurudeva. From this work came the aspirant, supplicant, and postulant vow books of the Church. In April, Gurudeva commenced the preparation of a definitive document for the lifetime vows of a Shaiva sannyasin, this to be called the Holy Order of Sannyas. It was the first time that the oral transmission of the Dharma for the Shaiva renunciate was ever assembled in a concise yet comprehensive document to guide the monk's life and clearly delineate their ideals, disciplines, and lifestyle. Gurudeva took this opportunity to have all of his sannyasins reaffirm and sign their vows in the new booklet, including a formal oath of entrance into his Shaiva Siddhanta Yoga order. He had first founded the Yoga order in the late 50s, and now it was becoming the core of his work and mission. For 10 years from 1970 to 1980, we had lived upon the island of Kauai with no members, no students, and no visitors. The only visitors were my shishyas on pilgrimage and close special guests of high caliber who enhanced the spiritual lives of the young monks, such as swamis, pandits, scholars, and the like. During this period, the monks spent their time in scriptural research for our publications, including a deep study of the two schools of Shaiva Siddhanta, the 6 schools of Shaivism, the 4 denominations of Hinduism, and all the major religions of the world. They supported themselves in rescuing a failed beekeeping industry, which they regenerated from 300 to a total of 3,000 colonies all over the island. This gave them a wonderful means for developing relationships on the island at a grassroots level. Rife with complex thought and mystical overtones, Gurudeva's teachings were as simple as sand. He spoke of man as not being the body, the mind, or the emotions, and brazenly declared, as had Yoga Swami before him, that man is not man, man is God. Again and again he drilled into all who would listen that the inherent nature of the soul is divine, existing in perfect oneness with God. This identity of the soul with God always exists, ever awaiting man's awakening into realization. Each of us is a perfect soul, he assured, living in a perfect universe. All of this, articulated now in the disciplined language of Shaiva Siddhanta, had been said by him decades earlier when he gave his 1959 talk called The Self-God. How far that talk went is another story told by Gurudeva. In the years that followed, tens of thousands of copies of the little booklet called The Self-God were printed in America and in Asia and had been widely distributed. To show just how widely, one day our car experienced a flat tire on a road outside a remote village in South India. As it was being repaired, we wandered about. People were passing by now and again. After a while, an elderly villager noticed us and inquired as to our native place. I handed him a little pamphlet to be polite. He looked at us, refused my offer, and pulled a little booklet from his shirt pocket, saying, "I am in need of nothing more. I have all I need right here." He held up my The Self-God booklet. Having made his point to these strangers, he walked on, not knowing he had been speaking to the author. In India and Sri Lanka, it is often referred to as the Little Gem, and is highly regarded as an explanation of the inexplicable Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Chapter 26, Standing Strong for Hinduism. As though operated by unseen stage hands in a cosmic play, doors began to open in the early 1980s for Gurudeva's mission to expand powerfully beyond American shores. After an initial visit to Malaysia with 2 Swamis, a 20-something group of Master Course students in Kuala Lumpur urged him to visit their country again. This journey was arranged as part of the 1981 Indian Odyssey to Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and India. 33 devotees, accompanying Gurudeva as inner searchers, became witness to what was unfolding in Malaysia, something historic, the introduction of an American guru to a country that had over 1 million Hindus desperately seeking spiritual guidance while living in the midst of 20 million Muslims. Gurudeva's visit was widely publicized as he met with the Hindu leaders of the nation and spoke to tens of thousands of Hindus in a dozen temples in and around Kuala Lumpur. Gurudeva's Western origins and ways of expressing Shaiva Siddhanta, which is the major tradition followed by Hindus in Malaysia, made it easy for them to relate to him. It galvanized especially the youth, woke them from a kind of hibernation, and brought them together in a spiritual fellowship that would help shape the next few decades of Shaivism in their nation. In the years to follow, Gurudeva returned again and again to personally direct their spiritual progress. Everywhere Gurudeva was greeted and honored with elaborate receptions by local religious groups and societies. At all public gatherings, he would introduce the Catechism and Creed to cheering crowds. He spoke with pride of the Shaivite religion, telling them that they were the inheritors of the most profound religion on the planet. They were accustomed to something different, to having their ancestral faith demeaned and belittled. Here was a guru from the West, tall, leonine, hazel-eyed, and wearing hand-woven Swami robes, telling them the opposite, telling them they could, no must, be proud of their religion and shout its virtues from their rooftops. At public meetings, Gurudeva gave such assurances they would never forget, gave them a new vision of themselves and a new courage to express that vision. How startlingly new this was to the Malaysians, who lived in the shadow of Muslim and Christian influence, is hard to imagine. But they caught his spirit, and their lives and those around them changed forever. Hinduism is the greatest religion in the world, Gurudeva thundered from podium after podium during 3 consecutive annual pilgrimage tours to India, Sri Lanka, and Malaysia in 1981, 1982, and 1983. Stand strong for Hinduism. Be proud to be a Hindu, he commanded to applauding audiences. All along the way, he would speak to standing-room-only gatherings at temples, ashrams, and public halls, each pilgrimage carrying a specific message. It was a mission to convert Hindus to Hinduism, as described by Gurudeva's spiritual brother and fellow worker for the Hindu Renaissance, Swami Chinmayananda, characterizing his own aims. A Hindu Renaissance. Historically, the modern renaissance of Hinduism began in the 1800s with the missions of Dayananda Saraswati, founder of the Arya Samaj, Ramakrishna and his disciple Swami Vivekananda, founder of the Ramakrishna Mission, Kadait Swami of Jaffna in Gurudeva's own lineage, Shiva Dayal of the Radhaswami Vaishnava sect, Arumuga Navalar of Jaffna, and Ramalinga Swami of Tamil Nadu. It included Elkanth Ranade, whose social reform thinking inspired Gandhi, Sri Aurobindo, who sought to advance the evolution of human consciousness, Swami Ramatirtha, who lectured extensively in America, Sadhu Vaswami, Ramana Maharshi, and many more. They were dedicated to bringing Hinduism out of centuries of oppression into its rightful place in the modern era. For all the progress made by these great men and dozens more since, there remained in the 1980s serious obstacles to a true Hindu renaissance. At a time when the brain drain was drawing India's best and brightest to America, perhaps it required Gurudeva, one of America's best and brightest, to travel the other way and remind Indians that they had something money couldn't buy: Hinduism, the greatest religion in the world. It was to be a tough mission. First, many Hindus wouldn't even admit they were Hindus. In a lecture in Sri Lanka, he described the problem. Today there are many Hindus who, when asked, "Are you a Hindu?" reply, "No, I'm not really a Hindu. I'm non-sectarian, universal, a follower of all religions. I'm a little bit of everything, and a little bit of everybody. Please don't classify me in any particular way." Are these the words of a strong person? No, too much of this kind of thinking makes the individual weak-minded. They are disclaiming their own sacred heritage for the sake of money and social or intellectual acceptance. How deceptive, how shallow. The word should go out loud and strong. Stand strong for Hinduism, and when you do, you will be strong yourself. Closely related to this lack of self-identity as a Hindu was the popular notion that all religions are one. Hindus don't need to claim to be Hindus, went this line of thought, because it doesn't really matter what religion you follow, since all are the same. This Hindu universalism was rampant, and its followers took every opportunity to deprecate traditional Hinduism as unnecessarily narrow. Furthermore, they argued, Hinduism is more lifestyle than religion. Gurudeva countered, all religions are not one. They are very, very different. They all worship and talk about God, yes, but they do not all lead their followers to the same spiritual goal. The Christians are not seeking God within themselves. They do not see God as all-pervasive. Jews, Christians, and Muslims do not believe that there is more than one life, or that there is such a thing as karma. They simply do not accept these beliefs. They are heresy to them. Going against a common trend, he preached the merits of sectarianism of each of the great traditions of Hinduism, Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Shaktism, and Smartism, retaining and valuing their unique features. The watered-down, homogenized Hinduism, which some were advocating, he warned, would not sustain the individual sampradayas, spiritual teaching traditions which are Hinduism's core strengths. One of India's leading thinkers, Sitaram Goel, wrote, Gurudeva's greatest contribution has been to rescue the word Hinduism from being a dirty word and restore it to its age-old glory. He made Hindus everywhere to see themselves as a world community and as inheritors of a great civilization and culture. Swami Advaitananda of the Brahmavidya Ashrama in India put it this way, in the present days when Hindus are ashamed to call themselves so, it has been his work and teachings that have propelled faith and infused dynamism among the millions who lovingly addressed him as Gurudeva. When speaking to Shaivites, Gurudeva would extol the greatness of their denomination and declare that Shaivism is the religion of the new age. Here in Sri Lanka and India, there is some misconception that in order to progress, in order to move into the age of technology, we have to abandon our religion, give up our culture. This is a false concept. Religion does not conflict with technology. It enhances it, gives it balance and purpose. Our religious teachers are beginning to teach the fact that Shaivism is the one religion on the planet best suited to this great age, which agrees most closely with the most advanced postulations of modern science, yet is itself even more advanced. Speaking at receptions in Shaivism's most venerated temples, in assembly halls and at village podiums throughout Malaysia, India, and Sri Lanka, Gurudeva stirred his fellow Shaivites into action. Newspaper coverage of the tour was extensive, and in the south of India, a taped radio program of his talks was broadcast on All India Radio. What to do about Christian infiltration? Gurudeva was astonished at the pervasive Christian influence in India, even though just 2% of Indians were Christians, and even though the British had left 50 years earlier. He found those in India educated in Christian schools to be anemic Hindus, their faith undermined by the years of study under nuns and teachers propounding an alien faith. One Catholic priest in Colombo told him straight on, the Hindu children that pass through my school may never become Catholics, but they certainly will never be good Hindus. Gurudeva had nothing against Christianity or any other religion. He came, after all, from a country where Christians are in the majority. Only rarely in his years of ministry in America did he experience any Christian interference. In his early years, he studied with deeply mystical teachers of several religions, including Buddhists, Muslims, and Christians. He knew the finer side of each faith. What he saw at the Christian schools was bad enough, but the methods of Christian missionaries, trickery, enticement, intimidation, incensed him. He opposed this devious side of Christianity wherever he found it, and told Hindus worldwide to stand by their religious rights as Hindus. When an elephant is young, he said time and again, the mahout trainer can control it with a small stick, and the elephant learns to fear that stick. When the elephant is big, he still fears the stick, even though he could pick it up and the mahout too and toss them far away. By this same psychology, Gurudeva said, Hindus had become meek and submissive under years of Christian rule and unwilling now to mount serious protest to continued Christian oppression, even when the political power which made it possible in the first place was gone. His advice was not to attack the Christians, but to disengage from and ignore them. He told crowds of thousands of Hindus to take their children out of Christian schools and to close their doors on Christian missionaries who came to their homes to proselytize. You can remember this when a missionary comes to your door. Welcome him with namaste. Tell him that we have a catechism of our own. We have a creed and an affirmation of faith in our religion too. We have our scriptures, our holy Bible of Shaivite Hinduism, the Vedas, Agamas, Tirukural, Tirumantaram, and so many sacred texts. We have religious leaders and a tradition that is vastly more ancient than any other. We have our holy temples and our great gods. We are proud to worship God and the gods. We have all this and more. Thank you very much, and then close the door. As Gurudeva ended each section of his talk to a crowd, there would be a soft murmuring of acknowledgement from those who spoke English fluently enough to follow his complex thoughts. A translator would often come to the microphone to repeat it all in Tamil, and when he finished, a roar would fill the temple or hall chambers, sustained cheers of appreciation, joyful applause as the crowd experienced the presence of an eloquent spiritual leader whose courageous words, especially about conversion and anti-Hindu campaigns, had often been whispered among them but never thundered from a public podium. Doubtless few had the courage to follow his advice. A handful of Hindus opposed him, unsure of what he was trying to do, or feeling perhaps that their turf was being encroached upon by an outsider. In 1999, he told his monks on a cruise ship during the Alaska Inner Search program about this time, "We did not fight them, them is us, but let them find out that we are all working for the same thing, the upliftment of Hinduism," and over the years they did, ultimately, causing Gurudeva to humorously lament, "I am so disappointed in my enemies, not one has ever been able to stay mad at me." Gurudeva's Renaissance message to the Shaivites of Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and India included Hindu pride, clear and public religious identity, correct religious understanding, reverence for scripture, respect for religious leaders, home worship, opposition to conversion, preservation of traditions, harmonious working together, interfaith harmony, Lord Shiva as the god of love, and Hinduism as best suited of all religions for the modern technological age. He dispelled many myths and misunderstandings about Hindu among Hindus and non-Hindus alike. He advocated a strong and loving Hindu home, encouraging mothers to not work but raise their children full-time, and for parents to not use corporal punishment on children. He projected this message with clarity, boldness, love, and humor. And he made a difference, redefining our modern Hindu world. Here is an excerpt from those talks. In looking back on all the wonderful aspects of Hinduism that have been spoken of tonight on the beautiful island of Sri Lanka, it is clear that Hinduism is the answer for the future generations on this planet. It is the answer for the new age, for the dawning Sat Yuga. The gracious Sanatana Dharma, our great religion, has all the answers. It has always had all of the answers in every age, for there was never an age when it did not exist. The time has now passed for many and is quickly passing for everyone when they can deny their Hindu heritage, when they can be afraid to admit their belief in Hinduism or even the simple fact that they are a Hindu. The time has come for Hindus of all races, all nations, all cultures, of all sects to stand up and let the peoples of the world know of the great religion of which they are one of the staunch adherents. Take courage, courage, courage into your own hands and proceed with confidence. Stand strong for Hinduism. It has been 4 years since Gurudeva had announced that he had settled his debt to his countrymen by teaching the truths of Advaita to non-Hindus, and henceforth was turning his attention towards the Hindu community and to and to non-Hindus who wish to follow him fully into the depths of the world's most ancient faith. When speaking from podiums throughout South India and Sri Lanka, he urged devotees to not allow their practice to be diluted by putting the icons of other faiths on their altars, a puzzling phenomenon he encountered in home shrines and even recently established temples. In order to really meditate to the depth of contemplation, and not merely to quiet mind and emotion and feel a little serenity, you have to be a member of a religion that gives the hope of non-dual union with God, that teaches that God is within man, only to be realized. Meditation, if it is to lead to jnana, must begin with a belief that there is no intrinsic evil and encompass the truth of karma, that we are responsible for our own actions. Such meditation must be undertaken by a member of a religion that gives a hope of a future life and does not threaten failure with eternal suffering, should failure be the result. Such meditation is possible, in fact required of those who follow the Hindu Dharma. Hence, the practice of yoga is the highest pinnacle within our most ancient faith. If you go through the entire holy scriptures of Shaivism, you will not find our saints singing hymns to Adonai, Yahweh, Buddha, or Jesus. Our saints told us to worship God Shiva, the supreme God, to worship Ganesha first before worshipping Shiva, to worship Lord Murugan. In the old days, there were millions of Shiva temples, from the Himalayan peaks of Nepal through North and South India, Sri Lanka, and what is now Malaysia and Indonesia. Everyone was of one mind, worshipping Shiva together, singing his praises with a one voice. As a result, India was spiritually unified. It was then the wealthiest country in the world. The worship of Shiva will give you wealth. The worship of Shiva will give you health. The worship of Shiva will give you knowledge. The worship of Shiva will fill your heart with love and compassion. The Shaiva Samayam is the greatest religion in the world. The Shaiva Samayam is the oldest religion in the world. The Shaiva Samayam has yoga. It has great temples, great pandits, rishis, and scriptures. All the saints who sang the songs of Shiva told us how to worship Shiva and how we should live our Shaivite lives. We must all follow those instructions. In singing those songs to Shiva, Shiva will give you everything that you ask for. He will give you everything that you ask for because Shiva is the God of love. Our saints have sung that Shiva is within us and we are within Shiva, knowing that fear and worry and doubt are forever gone from our mind. When the mind has resolved all of the differences through worship, penance, dharana, dhyana, then the inner, which is the stillness itself, is known. Then the inner is stronger than the outer. It is then easy to see every other person going through what has to be gone through during his or her particular stage on the path. Opposites are there, but no opposites are seen. This is why it is easy for the wise, made wise through spiritual unfoldment, to say, there is no injustice in the world, there is no evil, no sin. We only see opposites when our vision is limited, when we have not experienced totally. There is a point of view which resolves all contradictions and answers all questions. Yet to be experienced is yet to be understood. Once experienced and understood, the quiet comes. The karmas are quiet. This is the arduous path of Charya Kriya and Yoga resulting in Jnana. This is the path of not only endeavoring to unfold the higher nature, but at the same time, and toward the same end, dealing positively and consciously with the remnants of the lower nature.